What's up, guys? This is Pete Clark here with the Carrot Poker Podcast. This is episode number 71. And once again, as always, I have one of my friends and students with me here on the show. We have Nick with us today. How's it going, Nick?
Yo, what's up, man? How are you?
I am good, thanks. Yourself?
Pretty good. Can't complain.
Good. So we have you on the show basically because sometimes I like to show off the students that make the most progress in the shortest amount of time, partially just because it's good publicity for me, right? But also because it helps people see what can go right if you do the right things. And sometimes people ask me a question like, what are the chances of me succeeding if I do coaching? And I have two answers to that. One of them is like, do you want to know what the demographic is that succeed and make progress and become winners if they're not already? And the answer to that is probably something like 25 to 35% students or something. And the reason for that is not my coaching, because as you'd imagine, it stays the same pretty much all the time. I've kind of like figured out how to coach now. It's the students' attitude and the work ethic and what they put into it in between lessons and their attitude during lessons and stuff like that as well, and their mental game and all sorts of things. And then my second answer is, well, if you do everything I say and you do everything properly, then much, much higher than that, 25 to 35%. So the reason I wanted to get you on the show, man, is because you've basically from day one always just been like, okay, so this is what you say I have to do, I'll do it. And you've kind of just gone off and applied everything just as instructed, and it's worked out pretty well, right? So why don't you talk a little bit about where you were when we started coaching and where you are now, and just what you think has changed.
Absolutely. Yeah, so before I met you, I was pretty much struggling to win online. I would say I was a slight winner in live cash games, but nothing like I am now. I mean, I've definitely made the most progress throughout my career from when I started working with you till now. So I would say that definitely just listening to your advice, taking what I've learned from you and applying it on and off the table has definitely helped me become a winner.
And what would you say like is the biggest thing that coaching opened your eyes to when it came to like your approach to learning the game?
So the biggest thing that coaching opened my eyes to was that I really needed to not only just take what you were saying, just like you were saying, there's a small demographic that really wins in this game. So when you take all the information that I've learned from you and apply it off the table and really just increase my work ethic and tried harder to learn and get better, I would say just coaching in general helped me gain access to all of those things that help me become a winning player.
Gotcha. So basically, you think that the tools are there for people if they get coaching and they invest a bit of money, but it's basically how hard they work and how much of a boost that gives them to their determination and their work ethic that's going to make the biggest difference.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So what changed? What was your work ethic like, and what were your kind of approaches to studying and playing the game like pre-coaching, and then what have they been replaced? What habits have they been replaced by now that you would say are better?
So pre-coaching really consisted of like very little studying, watching a couple videos on Run It Once, talking some hand histories with friends, but nothing to the level that I'm doing now. Post-coaching, I would say that like I'm tagging hands, I'm reviewing hands, I'm working with the solvers, I'm really looking at spots and trying to solve and not just saying, oh, okay, like this is what I should do and then kind of just do it. Really looking at an in-depth strategy in almost every spot and just finding like and just gaining this obsession with just learning the game and getting better.
Yeah, I think the obsession is pretty important. It's like I think it's how meticulous we are in lessons that's really helped you as well, because one thing that you'll do is that's really healthy is that you'll say to me, hold on, let me relay what you've just said in my own words to make sure that I understand it. And if you can't do that, you know, we try and explain it, or we try and study it from a different angle until you can do that. And I think we've tried and tested that method so much now in the like, I don't know, we must have done like what, 15 lessons now or there or thereabouts, I guess. Um,
Yeah, somewhere around there.
yeah. And we've tried and tested this method that now, like, as soon as you relay it back to me, I know you've got it. And I know that you've got it in a productive way because you've been able to say, you'll repeat it at first, you'll let it resonate a little bit, and then you'll reword it. And then once you've reworded it, I know it's in there because you've just used your own language to articulate that concept. And that means that you can now access it in game or start practicing accessing it in game. I think a lot of students just sort of listen, say, that makes sense, that resonates with me, then they go off and they misapply. And I think that's the problem with them. You know, you were saying that you used to just watch videos. How did
Yeah.
you find that went just watching videos and then trying to apply stuff that you'd heard? Even if it's good advice, how did you find it went trying to apply it?
It was almost exactly like you just stated right there, was that it kind of just went in one ear and out the other. And with your coaching, it was like We talked about spots. I listened. I asked you to repeat if I didn't understand. And like you said, I really, put things into my own words so I ingrained the information instead of just listening and just saying, yeah, uh-huh, and then going and playing and making the same mistakes.
Yeah, because there's this thing called like echo learning, I call it, where I guess the student watches the video or they listen to a podcast like many of you are doing right now, and you guys should be careful of this because if you then find yourself at the table and you hear this like whisper that you heard earlier in the week or 2 weeks ago, and it sort of goes, check raising, gut shot is good. And actually, what you listened to at the time might be something like, check raising, this gut shot is fine, and it can be mixed with calling in this spot because we're big blind against button and ranges are wide, you see bet really high frequency. If you just remember check raise gut shot, you might check raise a gut shot in a three-way pot against the maniac, or I mean that's kind of an obvious example that many people would avoid, but you get the point, Nick, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
misapplication possible there.
Yep.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what stakes you were playing when you came to me for coaching, and then like what kind of stakes you're playing now.
Gotcha. So when I came to you for coaching, I was playing online. I was playing kind of whatever I had money in my account for. And then when I started taking it really seriously, I had like maybe like 500 or 600 bucks in there. And I started playing 50 and L, and I just completely ripped through them. And now I'm still playing 100 and L, working on 200 and L. Definitely a solid winner at 100. 200, the games are starting to get a little bit tougher, but I can definitely foresee myself winning in that pool.
Cool. And what about live?
Live, I play mainly 2-5. On the weekends, I'll play 5-10 when there's multiple games running, but I generally don't play too much 2-5. I like to go play live and play 5-10. I just think that there's not more fish, but I feel like the fish are bigger in the 5-10 games, whereas the 2-5 games is just like kind of dead.
Yeah, just like nettiness and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's like really nitty. There's really no action, but like when you get into the 5-10 games, like yeah, there's a bunch of regs, but there's still fish that are just spewing off stacks, and like the games are much more enjoyable at like the higher stakes, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. That's cool that you got to a point where you're now able to frequent those games, rolled for them, positive expectation, and making progress. So is poker now your full-time job?
Absolutely.
Cool. And that must take the pressure off as well, knowing that you've now been able to do that for long enough to have the confidence, right, to go forward with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just the mental stress since we started coaching is just completely like decreased. It's like I really don't have to worry. Like if I have a rough day, I know before coaching I'd have a rough day and I'd question myself, am I really a winner? Blah blah blah, all that nonsense. And now all that's just kind of right out the window. It's like I know that I'm winning in these games. Like I know long term I'm gonna win. I'm gonna do well. I'm doing my best. I'm trying hard. So I really don't have to worry about it if I lose 2, 3, 4 binds at 5-10 or whatever.
Definitely. That's an important point. And I think a lot of students, when I talk about the 25 to 35% of people who go from being break even to really successful under my coaching, the other 65 to 75% of people who fail, a lot of that is caused by really bad mental game issues. And we do therapy sessions. I've not had to do a lot of therapy sessions with you, but I do poker therapy sessions, mental game therapy sessions with a lot of students, and a lot of the time we have to spend like 3-4 hours or something out of a 10-hour package just on that, just to give somebody a chance. And then there's other students whose mental game has just been neglected for so long that it's just completely fallen apart. And I want to talk a bit more about mental game because you play in the New Jersey pool, right?
Yes.
And I would say that the mental game of the New Jersey player is, for whatever reason, be it cultural, demographic, we've talked about this before, be it just specific to the online culture of the pool, the mental game and the ego in particular is a bit more profound in that pool, right?
Yeah, I would agree 100%.
What is the kind of mental game leak that you think is most prevalent in the area where you play?
I just feel like everybody just has this like an extra fragile ego. Like they're very, what's the word I'm looking for? Is that they just feel like they need to prove themselves to everybody. So whether it be bragging or showing off or just doing whatever they have to do to make sure people know that they're like successful or a winning player or whatever it may be.
Yes, it's almost like the ego is so empty that it can only really be filled from outside perception and not like internally. So they're not able to work on their mental game themselves. They're looking for gratification elsewhere, and they're more concerned with how their play looks or how weak they look or how exploitable they look rather than how well they're actually playing on the face of it in reality, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think I suffered from that a little bit before we started coaching as well. I mean, I've definitely plugged a bunch of mental leaks, but I'm sorry. Ego is definitely one of the things that had to go if I wanted to be successful in poker.
it's not an easy thing to get rid of, because when you put a human in a competitive sphere like this and then you say put all your resources on the line and compete against other people using your intelligence and your decision making skills and your mental endurance, it's very hard not to go into some kind of fight mode permanently. And most poker students I teach are I would say, in a fight mode that's too fighty or a flight mode that's too flighty most of the time. Very few of them reach the kind of equilibrium where they're detached and objective about what's going on. And that's where you have to be, obviously, to succeed. So what was it that changed then? Like, what was it that, like, how did you treat that mental game leak of having ego like the rest of the pool did? Like, why do you not have it anymore?
And so I think after, like, I had a pretty rough summer over at the WSOP, and when I came back to New Jersey, I kind of just looked back at my issues and like what was going on, and that was right before I reached out to you for coaching. And I just looked at myself and I was just like, this is not how I want to be. This is not how I want to play the game. Like, I'm not having fun anymore. Like, I'm just getting angry. I'm getting pissed. Like, I feel like I'm being personally attacked. And I looked at it objectively and I said, you know what? It doesn't have to be like this. Just really work hard and try to figure out what's going on in your head, and then just realize why that's illogical. So every time something comes up that, can relate to your past experiences, you just have to stop yourself dead in your tracks and say, listen, this is wrong. Mm-hmm. And just do your best to just fix it and avoid it. And then after a while, it just became ingrained, and I was just able to just let it go.
Yeah, it's all about like doing it habitually, right? Like, if you can practice that mental game behavior over and over again, you're way more likely to have it stick permanently. Like, doing it once, doing it when you're running good. Students will say, like, how's it going today? And they might be like, terrible. And I'd be like, okay, let's work on X, Y, and Z to make things go better. Next week, how's it going? Oh, great. Fantastic. Like, how's it going? Great. I've won 6 buy-ins. Right, let's go over this thing we did last week. How have you applied this? I don't know what you mean anymore. I don't remember. I mean, that's pretty terrible, right? That's not going great. So when students have this idea that how things are going depends on their results, it's a vicious cycle of unrealistic feedback. And I think, like, a lot of time people get into that, what you were just describing there over the WSOP over the summer, where you're getting like bad results and then bad play and bad emotions, and it just one fuels the other, and it just like goes round and round and round until you somehow break that cycle permanently. But another point I have here is that I think it's very hard for humans to do anything good when they feel like they're under attack. Like, for as long as we are in a self-defensive survival mode, it's very hard to actually move forward, right? Because you're constantly just trying to protect yourself in some way, in any way you can. And that must feed into the general ethos in this pool, that people feel like they're threatened all the time, and that's why they have to act in that way. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree 100%. It's like, more often than not, you'll see a table full of players who are in defense mode with their ego, and they just don't want it to be broken, that they'll do whatever they can to defend it.
And that can come in various forms. It can be flight, it can be fight, it can be like trying to avoid loads of situations that are actually profitable that you should be in, or it could be like just creating really unprofitable situations to act as if you never fold, to act as if you're the guy that has to bully the other one out of the pot. There's lots of forms it can take, but I think that key point in your development there from what you're saying is when you just realize, like, hold on a minute here, I'm not under attack here. I've put myself in this environment where I expect this variance to happen to me, and I will lose sometimes, and nothing is victimizing me, so I don't have to actually protect myself with any emotional reaction. And when you realize that, suddenly things become a lot clearer. The water sort of settles on the lake, and you can sort of see what's actually happening in terms of EV. It's very easy to be blind to EV if you're in self-preservation kind of mode, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. It was like, once I flipped the switch to where I plugged all the mental game leaks, like you said, once the smoke cleared, I was able to create a path to higher EV rather than just a miserable life playing poker.
Yep. Cool. And I think that's why we've called this episode Smooth Sailing, because poker is never smooth sailing, but for a student like yourself who does everything they're meant to do, and we'll talk about all the little things we're doing in a minute, right, within coaching to help people get a sense of some of the stuff we're doing. But yeah, basically, poker's never an easy ride, but it can be relatively a hell of a lot less excruciating if you can do things right. It's always going to be a little bit excruciating as poker, but it can be a lot less so. So let's talk about our tagging system, because with my tagging system, right, I teach a student how to tag hands in PokerTracker 4/Hold'em Manager /hand to note, and I'll teach them the various categories that hand can go into and what those mean, and I'll get you to go through that in a minute.
Definitely.
And some students will look at it and be like, this sounds like a load of shit. I want to learn how to crush souls. I don't want to like spend my first lesson learning how to tag hands. And they might think it's a little bit beneath them, or it's too admin-y, like administrative or whatever. And then other students really get into it and they're like, yeah, this is like a new beginning. I'm going to do all my hands this way. And the guys who really get into it are the guys that make the most progress. And you've always used that system. Like, I've never seen you have a hand that doesn't follow the tagging hierarchy, basically, that we taught on day one. So let's go through what that is and why it's worked for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the hand tagging system. Like, pre-coaching, I never used it, but now, like, anytime I have a hand that I'm playing, just bang, quick tag review, and I get back to it after a session. So usually what I do is when I'm playing a hand, I'll tag it as review. And once my session's over, I'll tag it as review. And then I have other tags, including confusion, focus area, mistake, progress, and then when all said and done, review and corrected. So what we'll do in lesson is we'll go through our review hands, we'll go through each and every one of them, we'll break down the spots, and then we'll decide whether it's going to be one of the prior tags and write notes. And that is one thing that has definitely helped me become successful in poker, was the hand tagging system. Because now it's like, because poker is so repetitive and you're going to see similar spots very frequently, I think having the tagging system and being able to review those spots like on a regular basis is definitely beneficial to your game.
Yeah, and having it archived in a way where you can say, right, today I'm going to look through the mistakes I made in the last week, set a date filter, set the mistake tag, and let's talk about the notes that you write up, right? And I help you write them up, right? We word them together. Why do we do that? Why do we write up notes for every mistake that you make?
Well, kind of just like what we were talking about earlier, was that when we write up the notes and I can really put it in my own words, it's ingrained instead of just, like you said, echo learning, meaning I listen to what you say and it goes in one ear and out the other. It's that with the notes, we can really look back and have it in writing what we discussed on this specific hand.
Yeah, so we like actually make our learning permanent instead of falling into the trap of temporary or partial learning that afflicts 95% of poker students in a way that really diminishes their chances.
Absolutely.
I think students who have an absolute iron will determination will succeed, like pretty much whatever happens, but ones who don't, ones who are at all fragile or at all like easily perturbed when things don't go well, are going to need that structure in order to see the progress. Because the progress doesn't come in the form of a winning day or winning week, does it?
No, not at all.
Progress comes in the form of like a slow realization that you now understand the bigger picture, that the pieces, but like that moment if you're doing a jigsaw puzzle where you suddenly see a shape form that was just a blur of random pieces before. You suddenly see what it's a picture of and how the concepts like fit together, basically. All right, cool. So that's the learning kind of part of it. What are your aspirations from poker then, from now?
So my goal for this year is to, one, be able to play 200 as a solid winner, and also build a big enough role to where I can play in the higher games, like the 10 and a quarter games, travel around to different circuits, play in the cash games that are going on. Because generally speaking, over at the Borgata, being that I live so close, it's generally the only casino that I play. The higher stakes games are pretty tough. I would say that most of the regulars in the 10 and a quarter plus games are like pretty solid. So I definitely want to be able to get myself comfortable enough to travel around, find the best games, play the higher stakes, and definitely just keep increasing in stakes, building a role, making investments, stuff like that. So just continuing to make progress on and off the table.
Nice.
Kind of my goal for the next year.
Yeah, cool. And I like that it's kind of general as well. It's not like I'm going to be at this stake by this date or anything like that. It's just like I'm going to keep getting better. And also what you'll find is that you're getting better, kind of, it doesn't plateau, but it starts to like level off a little bit, because at first, when you first do something like coaching, you'll soar and you'll make like loads of progress if you do everything right. Obviously, you work on your mental game and you do everything you need to do. And then you'll reach a point where you have to work really hard just to get the same acceleration curve of learning. And when you hit that, I think it's fine just to lessen your goals a bit and be like, okay, as long as I keep moving forward slowly and steadily here, it's fine. As long as I don't stagnate, it's fine. You don't have to be like steaming ahead at exactly the same velocity for your whole poker career, because that's unrealistic as well. So that's a pretty good goal, for sure. Nice and general, but also ambitious. Okay, let's talk technical stuff for a minute here. I want you to put your mind not where it is now after 15 hours of coaching. I want you to go back to the beginning of when we started working together. I want you to think about what your technical game was like there. And I want you to think about the first few sort of lessons and the first few epiphanies that you had. What were some maybe technical concepts that you realized you'd been thinking about in the wrong way, and you'd rewired those to get a better understanding of EV, a better understanding of the game? Can you think of any areas initially that you sort of just suddenly realized that you've been thinking about incorrectly?
Yeah, I think so. One of the big concepts that definitely helped me gain an edge was kind of just having a higher c-bet frequency, applying a range bet properly, and instead of just like check folding a ton, like checking back the flop and folding to a turn probe. I think that was one big leak that really helped me start becoming a winner. Was that, okay, like on super dry boards in position, range bet and then break up your range on the turn, etc. Just stuff like that in the technical game. I would say I was using less aggression than optimal.
Yeah.
And now I'm definitely being more aggressive, a lot less check folding, a lot more betting and raising. And
yeah, because when you're too passive. Sorry?
I just said not as much passiveness before we started.
I think when there is too much checking in your game and there's too many reasons not to do things, you can sometimes lose sight of why you should be making investments. Like poker is all about making the right size of investment at the right time, basically, right? And avoiding bad investments. I don't think you ever made many bad investments. You were never a player who called down far too wide or made bad bluffs or bet hands that shouldn't be betting because they're too mediocre or anything like that. Those leaks do exist. That wasn't really you. It was more just not seeing the kind of golden opportunity to pillage loads of EV from making a bet that you wouldn't normally make and things like that. So you can see the effect that's probably had on your red line if you look at your graph now and your graph then, right? And you should hopefully see the red lines like leveled off considerably, I would imagine.
Definitely, yeah. My red line before coaching was just plummeting, and now it's somewhat stable.
For anyone that isn't aware of what the red line is, it's the money that we win or lose without showdown. So when our opponents fold or we fold and the hand ends via no one else being in the pot. So if you miss lots of good investments, it plummets because naturally you're in an environment where your red line does fall because you have to post blinds and you have to fold a lot pre-flop and things like that, and there's 5 other players at the table, so you can't just like enter every pot and win it. So your red line will fall naturally, and what you have to do is be super alert for spots where you can negate that by picking up lots of pots. What are some exploitative, I don't want you to give away like all the reads on the pool or anything like that, but what are some spots where you thought where you think you were under bluffing previously that you're now betting at a really high frequency and to good effect?
Definitely flop floating, meaning like the pool just has a tendency to just check fold way too much, so I've definitely been capitalizing on that leak.
Yeah, so unprotected checking ranges and things like that from the out of position player.
Very infrequently will you find a reg or even a player in the pool who is balancing the checking range optimally.
Yep, I think
that's kind of definitely like a huge leak in that spot.
I think that's specific, not just the Jersey pool, but all pools actually. Below a certain stake, that is in live as well. People just do not think that when they check because they don't want to bet, that they have to do something to stop their opponent from just betting all of their range, because you do. And the average fold to flop float bet stat, which is how often they check and then fold as a pre-flop raiser in a heads-up pot in the flop, or multi-way as well. But heads up, I'd say its average is maybe 60-70% in this pool. And if you think about it, if you make a half pot c-bet, or a float bet, sorry, you only need 33% fold equity, even if you have 0 pot equity. So you end up being able to bet like all of your range at a stupid, like ridiculous high EV that should never be allowed. And people need to, let's hope that lasts a while. Let's hope that not many people hear this podcast to change it. Let's face it, it will last a while. No one changes. People have the same mistakes over and over again for years and years. That's humans, thankfully. All right, good. So that's some of the stuff we've been doing. Definitely getting more aggression into your game. And these days, I think we're more working on bluffing, right? We're looking at like, and not just bluffing more, but various methods of bluffing, things like overbetting and adding these tools. So do you want to talk a little bit about the difference between the leak busting we were doing and now what we're doing now, which is like adding to the, I guess, the front end of the game as we would see it, right?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing we've been working with recently is not only bluffing, but sizing. And I think sizing is key. I'm still not unaware of what sizings we should use, but I'm really trying to pinpoint in every spot what the correct sizing should be. And that kind of just ties back with the geeky obsession I was speaking about earlier, is that every time I'm in a spot or looking at a hand, I'm really curious as to what the correct sizing would be. So I think that and finding good spots to bluff are definitely something that we've been working on the front end. Because I think my game was lacking a lot of bluffing. Check raise bluffing as well. Bet check bet is a bluff as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those are like the key areas of focus at the moment.
Yeah, I think when you start just making loads of investments, you start playing around with things, you start to see where people overfold, and they overfold more than they don't in most spots, right? Like most spots get overfolded in most pools.
Yeah, I would agree.
So just finding situations where you can add extra bluffs into your range and stuff like that, it's just great. And also like another thing that we worked on a lot with you was that you used to be a little bit, when we started out, I think you were a little bit adverse to putting yourself into uncomfortable situations. So like calling 3-bets or calling out the blinds, you didn't really like doing it because of how it felt. And then we sort of looked closer at the EV and we learned that, okay, well, it might not be amazing to call here, but folding, it will cost us a ton in the long term. And this call doesn't have to perform at much of an EV to be better than folding, right? So I think that was another thing, right? Making those calls more.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely just V-pipping in spots I normally wouldn't was something we worked on also.
Yeah, like creeping into pots that you might otherwise miss if you're multi-tabling and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, these small things are just so important because they create the kind of red line change that's permanent and not just due to variance. They create this very smooth red line acceleration, basically, or maybe just reduce the deceleration of the red line, and that's really important. So all those little spots, for sure. All right, cool. Yeah, so what do I want to talk about now? I guess what I want you to answer then is, given that you've had quite a bit of success recently, you've had a kind of breakthrough, what would be like a couple of tips you would give to somebody who is, let's say even at a lower point's probably a bad way of putting it, earlier point in their poker career than you were when you came to me for coaching. So I want you to think right back when you first started playing, right? Would you agree that I mean, most people would agree with this, would you say that you wasted a lot of time in your poker journey at the beginning because you didn't have the right direction?
Yeah, I would say that I didn't waste all of my time, but the time from where I started gaining success could have definitely been reduced. I mean, so maybe wasting some time is definitely on point, but I would say I learned a lot in the journey, but I definitely could have cut it short if I just went right to coaching earlier.
Right. So maybe get coaching earlier is one tip, but say for people who aren't willing to, they don't have the budget for coaching yet or aren't wanting to make that investment yet, they'd rather try it on their own. What would be like a couple of tips you could give them about how to like go about the start of their poker career, basically?
Well, one thing I would say is definitely work hard on and off the table with studying and training materials, and also be objective of what you're doing in the game, just to see is that, like, really try and find what you're doing wrong and fix it instead of just, doing what I was doing and just waking up, doing my morning routine, playing, losing, making mistakes, okay, not being objective about it, doing the same thing the next day until you put yourself at a point where you have a breakdown and then you say, okay, I need to change this. So I think if I could say anything, is just don't do what I did and just push yourself to the limit until you break down. Is that really try and find what you're doing wrong and fix it.
And this is... Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go.
No, I was just going to say, this is like my car in the garage kind of analogy here, a garage if you're from my part of the world, where if the car is currently not working properly, you don't try and drive it until it explodes, right? You fix it. So what you're saying there is basically yourself and a lot of aspiring poker players as well have a tendency to force volume, and they think if I play more, everything will be okay. I'll put in enough hands and I'll just become better through playing, and then suddenly the car will be working. But actually what needs to happen is it needs to go into the garage, it needs to get X, Y, and Z jobs done to it, and only then can it go out and do a load of mileage on the road. And neglecting that study part of the study-play ratio is just one of the biggest mistakes you can possibly make. I think I spoke about that in a recent podcast, actually, with someone else. So
yeah, it's huge. I mean, that kind of just hits the nail on the head with what I was doing.
Yeah.
Was that I really just thought that if I just keep playing, I'll adapt and I'll learn, I'll get better. And meanwhile, while I'm not studying, all my opponents are studying and getting better, and they just had a huge edge over me. And now that I was objective about it and decided to just let the ego go out the window and seek help and get coaching, I was able to plug all those leaks and on the ride to success.
Yeah, and I think it's not even just the case of getting coaching, but it's about being in the right place. Like, I think after having a kind of poker meltdown, a breakdown as you put it, you've kind of reached a low point in your career where you've smashed all of your, like, almost nothing matters anymore. You've smashed all of that ego, all of those walls to the ground, and you're left with this like fleshy pulp at the core, and then that's going to be receptive to learning and rebuilding, right? So maybe sometimes people do need to get to that point where they have that kind of, I am failing here. I am literally failing. I need to change everything before they can do that. Maybe people.
Yeah, that was definitely the case with myself. Yeah. And I think that's probably going to be the case with most people, especially in the New Jersey pool, like we said, where everybody's just so egotistical that nobody's really quick to admit that they're wrong or doing something wrong. So once I was able to realize that, it was kind of just like a whole new ball game that we were playing.
Yeah, for sure. Suddenly, like, it's all clear and you can see a path that you can forge through the forest. Even if it's going to take time, you can at least know which direction to go in.
For sure.
That's it. It doesn't matter how long it takes, guys. It's being in the right path that's really the key to success in this game, and knowing you're on the right path. I was also going to talk to you couple of final things. First one, taking criticism, right? I know that's related to this ego thing and stuff like that, but I have students that the students who make the most progress are the ones that I can literally be like, yeah, what you've done there is terrible. It's a massive loss of EV. You need to really think about why you've done that, what caused it at the time, and how you're going to stop yourself doing that again, because that'll destroy you. You won't win doing that. And if I can put it but that's about as harsh as I get, right? I don't really get any harsher than that. That's kind of my ceiling. If I can reach my ceiling of criticizing you, and you can take that, then we are going to go forward well, right? If you can't handle my ceiling of criticism, probably it means that you've got mental game issues that are stopping you looking at your game objectively. Because the real key skill of being a poker player is being able to look back at your in-game self and be like, in-game self screwed up. In-game self thought X when he should have thought Y, and I know why he did that. And it's not a case of beating yourself up, right? It's not a case of berating yourself. It's a case of being like, don't worry, in-game self. I've got you, man. I've got you. I'm going to look after you. I'm going to figure out why you did that and make sure you don't do it again. And that kind of nurturing your in-game and appreciating that your in-game play will always be further behind your out-of-game play. That self-nurturing, that is what you need to do in poker. You need to do it honestly and objectively. So I guess that's what I try and do when I put things like that. I'm trying to like help the student nurture their in-game self. And some guys will get defensive, and when they do, they put up the walls, and then learning will temporarily cease until we can break down those defensive barriers. So would you say that was have you always been good at taking criticism, or is that a new development that you've learned to do from poker?
Definitely a new development that I've learned from poker. Also, excuse me. Yeah, I've definitely learned that from poker. I mean, it's also transferred to other aspects of life. It's like in any other situation, even outside of poker, where someone has something to say or they comment on what I do, it's like I kind of just listen to everything with a grain of salt. And it's just like if they have a good point or they're making a solid point or objection, like I tend to listen.
Yeah. And
kind of just like weed out all the bullshit. So when you're sitting there telling me, oh, that you played that hand miserably, like you're not supposed to be doing that, like learn from this, instead of me sitting there getting defensive and being like, oh man, what a dick. I'm just like, yeah. I'm just like, you know what, dude? You're right. I'm not going to do that again.
Yep. That's it. Because, I care about coaching because it's a very rewarding thing when it goes right. And one of the reasons I do that is that if I just had the same like intonation all the time, you might not tell the massive EV mistakes from the smaller ones. So if it's a little mistake, I might be like, oh, you might want to try this. A big one, it's like, what are you doing? That's when I want to make a big deal about it. So it sticks, basically. But yeah, I've always found you take criticism really well, and I think that's why it has been smooth sailing in coaching so far. It's just this idea that like, okay, here's the objection. Let's engage with it for exactly what it is, and let's make that permanent. Let's make that a permanent objection that you're going to be able to give yourself when you're playing.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's helped me a lot was your constructive criticism, just pointing out to me where I was going wrong, and then more importantly, why it was wrong and how to fix it.
Exactly. You need the full step. So my only concern with you, Nick, is that you know my coaching method and you apply it so well that you could probably put me out of a job by starting to coach, and just doing the whole thing, because you sound just like me sometimes when you're doing it. It's kind of creepy when you're going through a hand, but that's good. Like that kind of, I'm going to adopt this framework fully is what you need. If you're going to pick someone as your coach, you kind of do have to adopt their framework, like as far as possible. So it's been good. I look forward to seeing what your progress is in the next year. I'm sure we've got more coaching to do, and I'm sure that we'll get closer to achieving all of your poker goals and dreams and ambitions and stuff like that. So keep up the good work.
Thanks, man.
All right, thanks for coming on the show. It's good talking to you, and it's nice to do a show that's about people doing well and not just a show that's like why you're failing or whatever, right? So guys out there watching this, there are students like Nick, not a great deal, but there are, and they succeed because of the stuff this guy's been telling you today. This has all come from him. This is not just me. This is teamwork. So if you're interested in coaching, hit me up, admin@carrotcorner.com. My rates are on carrotcorner.com, my website. Bunch of products on there as well for you guys to have a look at. Books, Poker Magazine, Pio versus Population, episode 4, by the way, is now out. If you're wondering when that was coming out, it came out like a day before this podcast was released. So we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks again, Nick, and all the best in your poker career.
All right, man, appreciate it.
All right, guys, run good. I'll see you soon.